Welcome to the FullTime Fantasy Podcast, presented by the Fantasy Football World Championship, home to the industry's most accurate rankings.
What is up, everybody, and welcome to the FullTime Fantasy Podcast. I am your host, Adam Krautwurst, and with me is the man, full-time himself, Jody Smith, NFL. Jody, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing good, Adam. It was funny. We were talking about Scott Fishbowl drafts coming up and how excited we are. And, of course, everyone else, is as well. So looking forward to that. That's just over a month now.
Yeah, no, that'll be fun.
A bunch of stuff coming up. You're going to FSGA.
Yeah, a couple weeks for the FSGA.
That's like, what, 2-3 weeks away?
2-3 weeks away. I'll be in the experts draft up there. So they were kind enough to have me, just a little old me, the high stakes guy, and
representing the crew.
That's right. Representing the crew. I'll be competing with the best of the best. The guy who I'm posting for tonight, former host Billy Musial, will be in it. So I love competing with Billy, but yeah, it'll be fun. Scott Fishbowl will also be great. I'll be at the live Buffalo event for that. Mike Shope, my co-host from the Deep End, will be hosting that event. So lots of fun. I mean, June is when it really hits. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, we got the experts draft and the rankings and all that stuff coming out. So I love it. I'm super excited.
And speaking of experts and rankings, that's what we're here to talk about tonight.
That's right. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. That's right. And speaking of it almost being June, today is May 31st, and that means it's the last day of the May Madness for the 11th Annual Fantasy Football World Championships. Lock in the discounted early bird pricing. While other contests have bigger grand prizes, their formats provide more luck for their opponents, and our top-heavy contest where you only win about 70% of what you can win in your league of 12 at the FFWC. They have a Dominator prize at the FFWC of $10,000 you can win just for winning your league, which is really, really sweet. Plus 4 teams from each league make it to the playoffs, which is awesome, and have a chance at $150,000 grand prize. Sure, everybody loves the big grand prizes out there. We all know where to find them, but a lot of times it's just lottery tickets, right? But at the FFWC, ROI matters. So go to playffwc.com. That is playffwc.com. I'm already registered for 3 of those main events, Jody. I'm going to be drafting live in Vegas. I've already got my plane ticket ready to go, and I'm ready to roll. Are you going out to Vegas this year?
That's badass. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to squeeze it in. There's so much, coming up, and even not even just fantasy. Like I said, I've got a move coming up here. I've got a live startup draft. I've got Scott Fishbowl. We've got the expo coming up, and there's just other things that are on the schedule. So we'll see. It's on the to-do list though.
Perfect. Yeah, no, you got to get out there. It's so much fun, especially the way that the FFWC does it. It's like, it's not in a big ballroom, right? It's in like these nice like penthouses up on the top floors of I think it's the MGM this year, over in that area. It's so much fun. It's a whole different vibe than being in the big ballroom. So the food's great, the people are great, the drinks are great, the draft is great. So it's going to be a good time again. But yeah, we'll jump right into it tonight. So talking about your rankings versus the ECR expert consensus rankings. And listen, you've got some experience. I see that trophy just like a halo over your head back there. You've done this before. You've done well in these ECR contests, right?
Well, yeah, that what you see behind that's for in-season rankings. I did finish, I think, 8th last year in draft rankings, which actually, in my opinion, is actually more difficult. And the previously aforementioned Billy Musial is the reigning champion for number 1 draft rankings. So between the two of us, we had 2 top 10 draft rankers for fantasy, full-time fantasy, and that was for the 2021 draft rankings. So it's a whole different beast, but it's a good practice to start on that early. As everyone knows, there really is no more off season. So it's just an issue of like Adam, like you and I and Bradley kind of worked on a little bit last month. You get your initial run of projections cleaned up right after the draft, and then at that point on, you're just kind of shoring them up. But I feel pretty good about where my initial projections and rankings are right now, and that's why I think it's not too early to start talking about guys that I'll be targeting here in these early drafts.
Love it. So we'll start at quarterback. First guy on the board is Justin Herbert. You have him as QB4. The consensus rankings have him as QB7. Talk to me about Herbert and why you think you're higher than the consensus rankings.
Yeah, one thing to mention here at the top about consensus rankings is it is kind of early. So there's only about 55 to 60 experts who have turned in rankings. And to be honest with you, they may have been initial presentations that really haven't been updated and stuff. So things will clean up a little bit here as the summer progresses and all that. So just want to say that this is early. So some of these things might look off. But as far as Justin Herbert, so I think at this point, we're all pretty firm on who our top 3 quarterbacks are. You can rearrange them in whatever order you would like. And then it comes down to there's this little mini run of second tier of quarterbacks. And most of the time you're seeing Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow listed as QB4. And for me, in my initial projections, Justin Herbert comes out just a little bit higher than Joe Burrow as my QB4. Now, it's not without a little bit of risk, but I feel like Herbert kind of bottomed out last year. His touchdown production dropped off, and I feel like the introduction of Quentin Johnson, the number 21 pick, and the addition of Kellen Moore is the big thing for me. With Kellen Moore, talking about a Cowboys team that was second in yards per game, second in points per game. Over his tenure, they were 7th in expected yards over average. This is a guy who can design some trick plays and get an offense humming. And I think he's a really good, perfect fit for what Herbert can do. My initial expectations have Herbert, right around 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. And like I said, he's up there. He's contending for, the QB1 tier. But for me right now, he comes in as my QB4, which is, like you said, 3 spots ahead of consensus. Honestly, I feel like quarterback's pretty sharp right now. It's hard to find value. So I went with Herbert.
I love this, Jody. Herbert, super arm talent, physical talent, no question about it. And can you ask for a better, he might have the best pass catching running back in football, right? Like you said, smart young coordinator coming over. And could you ask for a better trio of wide receivers for their skill sets, right? You got Keenan Allen who can work over the middle, and then you got Mike Williams, Big Mike, who can go deep, Quentin Johnston who can go deep and run after catch. You couldn't ask for Gerald Everett, like you said. Herbert, the Chargers feel like they're always breaking everyone's hearts when it comes to everything, even losing in the playoffs last year, that blowing that lead, oh my God. But Herbert, I love this. It's guys like Herbert and it's guys like Lamar, the reasons why and nobody loves Josh Allen more than me. Nobody. I've got 8 Allen jerseys. I've been on him since he was coming out of Wyoming. And so, but Herbert and Lamar Jackson are the reasons why I'm not going to have much Josh Allen in in the high stakes leagues, because I can get Herbert 4, 5, 6 rounds later, in some of these drafts. And the upside, 30 touchdowns. I know you got to project him for something that looks normal, but he could push 35, 36, 37 touchdowns with all the weapons he had.
He had 38 just 2 years ago.
He's 40.
Really pretty good. He's a pretty good runner too.
Exactly. So he was hurt last year. He had the rib injury. I love this. I'm completely on board. I love it. Second quarterback, Russell Wilson. And I can't wait to hear you talk about this because I just don't know what to do with him. You have him as your QB 11. Consensus rankings have him at 17. So talk to me about Russ.
Yeah. Last year was just an unmitigated disaster, for the Broncos. And Wilson was, he gets plenty of blame for that too. His play wasn't good, but gosh, Nathaniel Hackett, it's hard to have any confidence in anything we saw out of Denver last year. As soon as they got rid of Hackett, amazingly, all of a sudden, granted, it was just the last 2 games of a year and it was meaningless games for the Broncos. But from a fantasy perspective, he was QB5 in week 17 and QB2 in the final week of the season. So I like the progress that Wilson made once they got rid of Hackett. And the schedule is actually pretty favorable for Denver passing game this year. They added Marvin Mims. They already had a couple of solid receivers in Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. I think people are overreacting to what we saw out of Wilson last year. I'm expecting a little bit of a rebound. So to me, you add in that he still is a pretty good runner, as we saw, which was evidenced by once Hackett was out of the way, all of a sudden Wilson had his highest rushing attempts of the season in that final game. So I'm expecting a little bit of a rebound. QB 11 might be a little high, but we'll see as things play out here during the summer, as everyone's rankings shore up. And, it's obviously even my own personal rankings, he could drop a spot or two, but you could easily say, I'd rather take my chances with a Kirk Cousins. Perfectly understandable. Cousins is a lot safer, but I like the upside of Russell Wilson right now. I think he's a really good value. And like I said, overall, he's the highest. Russell Wilson and Brock Purdy right now are the two guys I'm the highest on versus their ECR. Just didn't talk about Brock Purdy because he comes in so low because, obviously the injury concerns.
Sure. Yeah, I like that. I mean, another team that's loaded with weapons. And if you're right about Sean Payton and about Russell Wilson figuring it out, I mean, not only can you get Russ way cheaper than even you have him ranked. I mean, Judy's going in the 5th round. Sutton's going in like the 9th round. I mean, there's all types of players that you can get in this offense. Easy stackable, cheap stackable offense right now for these best ball tournaments and stuff. So yeah, no, I love that vibe on Wilson. I'm going to keep a close eye on that, but that all sounds right to me for sure. All right, over to running back, Isaiah Pacheco, your first guy, Chiefs running back. You have him as RB22, ECR ranking RB26, so slightly ahead. You have him as a low end RB2. Talk to me about Pacheco.
Yeah, it's just, I'm just not a believer in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Obviously, the team isn't either. They would have, there would have been a little bit more conversation about maybe picking up that contract, which obviously that was probably the easiest no-brainer decline. But I really liked what I saw out of Pacheco when you look at the advanced analytics and the numbers. Once Clyde Edwards-Helaire got hurt last year and Pacheco kind of became the main guy, he really kind of started putting on a show. He was looking at player profiler, he was 10th with 4.8 true yards per carry. Overall, 16th yards per touch out of running back. And he was a really, really good pass blocker. Player profiler ranked him number 2 as a pass blocker. Now, granted, to Chiefs, he's not going to spend an extraordinary amount of time back there blocking. He didn't catch a ton of passes. I think that's an area that he needs to work on, that I'd like to see growth from. Obviously, they re-signed Jerick McKinnon, but we talked last week. Jerick McKinnon's not catching 9 touchdowns again. That's just not going to happen, in particular with their offensive coordinator now being in Washington. So we'll see if Pacheco gets a little bit more involved, in the passing game. But overall, once he took over, he was averaging about 15 touches per game. You extrapolate that out 17 games, and you're talking 255 plus touches. To me, that all adds up to a pretty decent RB2. And I think he's being a little bit, just slightly underdrafted right now.
Yeah, that's interesting too. I mean, it was a situation where like Andy Reid running backs, Andy Reid had like a top 12 running back, like 15 out of like 18 years at one point. And then the CEH era started. But I'm wondering if Bieniemy had something to do with that too. Like maybe he'd like to rotate the backs a little bit more than Andy Reid liked. So maybe with Bieniemy gone, maybe we get back to that a little bit more of a workhorse role. Not that necessarily Pacheco can handle that, but Pacheco passes the eye test too. I mean, that's why I was drafting him. And a lot of people were drafting him like in the preseason. They're looking, well, wow, this guy looks incredible in the preseason. Like, I mean, he was getting up to the 9th, 8th round in some of these drafts at the end of August. And he looked like the best running back there last year too. So like you said, they're not bringing CEH back for another year. He'll be there this year, but CEH just he's not it. He's not the answer, obviously. So I could see Pacheco staying at around the RB26 area too. Moving on to the next back, who I love, Antonio Gibson. Man, everyone loves Antonio Gibson. Yeah. You have him as RB29, ECR 38. So maybe they don't love him as much as I thought everybody did. Talk to me about Gibson.
Adam, again, this is going to be a situation because almost every podcast that you listen to or every analyst you talk to is talking about the potential for Antonio Gibson. Now,
Yeah.
this momentum has shot up with Eric Bieniemy, who we just talked about his former team. Well, now he's in Washington, and that's where the excitement is kind of playing in for Washington because of how often Bieniemy's offenses targeted Jerick McKinnon. Obviously, became a huge factor last year simply based on his red zone role and his role as a receiver. And when it comes to Washington's offense right now, you can say what you want about Gibson's relationship with the coaching staff and the depth chart there, but he's the only viable pass catching back on the roster. Brian Robinson had all of 12 targets last year. Chris Rodriguez had like 20 catches throughout his entire college career. So when it comes to third down, receiving backs, or whatever, Antonio Gibson's clearly going to be the guy. He was 12th in running back targets last year and 12th in receptions. He was strong in yards per route run. As a runner, he's a legitimate threat too. He can get in there and split carries with Robinson, or if Rodriguez gets involved. I really think that as the summer plays out, you're going to see Gibson's ADP start to creep up. It probably already is. So right now, for you early drafters out there, and if you're listening to a podcast on May 31st, you're a zealot, so you're out there and you're involved. Scoop up as much Antonio Gibson as you can. In particular, if you can get him way down in round 9, around 8, around 10, right where RB 35 to RB 40 is going.
Yeah, he's a great 0 RB candidate. And like you said, Rodriguez, he profiles more of a between the tackles banger, kind of like Robinson does too. So I don't see him taking passing down work from Gibson. And again, new offensive coordinator comes in, he might take a look at this backfield differently. Oh man, I love Gibson's talent. So I will say Robinson did look a lot better the last couple of games of last season when he finally seemed to started to really get over the gunshot and getting himself back in shape. He looked much more explosive in the back end. But again, if he can just be in an offense and Bieniemy where they want to pass the ball, and they're not a great team, they're going to be losing a lot of games. And they don't have I get nervous when there's an overly athletic quarterback behind there that's instead of checking it down, they're gonna run it. But if you can just get a quarterback there that's going to keep checking it down to the running back, Gibson could actually have a monster year for sure. All right, Deuce Vaughn, RB 63, basically draftable. ECR has him as RB 99, almost undraftable. Talk to me about Deuce Vaughn.
This just basically is a flyer for us to kind of pay attention to what the Cowboys are going to do. Because obviously, I don't know why you would think that they would want to change their usage from Tony Pollard. He's been so extremely efficient with the usage he's had over the last couple of years, and especially last year. But it's that interesting 248 touches that Ezekiel Elliott had that to me is kind of up for grabs. I do think that although Kellen Moore is no longer there, I think the Cowboys have every intention of keeping Pollard generally on about the same track of touches that he had last year since he was so effective with it. That's why I expect whoever emerges as Dallas's RB2 can, have a pretty useful role. I mean, I think it's Deuce Vaughn, but Deuce Vaughn's a little small. I liked his profile overall coming into the league, but Malik Davis, that's another name to keep an eye on, and he's going even further. He's actually down outside of the top 100, if I'm not mistaken. So it's an issue. It's a situation that basically by me putting it on there, I want people to kind of be open to what's going on in Dallas. I know that Deuce Vaughn has kind of turned some heads so far in OTAs, which is a good sign. Like I said, I expect him to emerge, but it's a situation that could play out. I mean, not only in particular, Tony Pollard is going to be drafted at, as a early second rounder in most leagues. So if you're looking for a handcuff, pay attention to that backfield this summer. And if one guy kind of clearly emerges as the RB2, expect his ADP to skyrocket up, 20, 30 spots.
So you're basically saying whoever, Deuce Vaughn or Malik Davis, something like that.
I think we all kind of want it to be Deuce Vaughn, but you can't rule out Malik Davis. It's only his second year too, and he had his moments last year too. But I don't expect obviously these guys to get the 248 touches that Elliott got last year. But whichever one does kind of emerge as Dallas's RB2, and also don't rule out that Zeke could re-sign with them. By the way.
Oh God.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Whoever does emerge as the potential Dallas RB2 should definitely be on fantasy radars.
Love it. Two of a wide receiver, Christian Kirk. You have him as wide receiver 22. ECR has him as wide receiver 31, the expert consensus rankings. Why are you so much higher on Christian Kirk?
Yeah, to me, this is just bad consensus rankings. That's the easy excuse here. It's not that I feel like I'm too high on Christian Kirk. It's just, I mean, he was a wide receiver 12, last year, and it wasn't like Jacksonville's offense was off the charts. But to me, it comes down to usage. I think people are kind of overreacting right now to Calvin Ridley. A lot of people actually have Ridley ranked ahead of Christian Kirk, and I really don't feel like Calvin Ridley is going to necessarily take targets away from Christian Kirk. Keep in mind that Kirk, 75.2% of his routes last year came from the slot. In his last 2 seasons in Atlanta, Ridley was basically the exact opposite. 89% of his routes came from the perimeter. So if anything, Zay Jones will be the big loser here. I expect Christian Kirk's targets to actually maintain about the same level. And yes, for sure, Calvin Ridley will be able to put up his own production. He may be more of a red zone threat, but I feel like Christian Kirk is a pretty safe option, and I have him conservatively 10 spots lower than what he finished last year, and it still feels like for it to be +9 on ECR, it just makes me wonder, like, why are people so low? I can't really figure it out. Those are only 2 things I came up with, and I think in time, I think Christian Kirk will stabilize out between, say, wide receiver 24 and 27. But wherever, if he's in the 20s, I feel like he's a really, really good value.
So who's the big loser here in Jacksonville? Is it Evan Ingram? Because Calvin Ridley's going to come in and command targets, right? I mean, you're the projections guy. You put all the numbers together. Who's the big loser?
Yeah, I think Ingram's a good one. He was, close to top 5 last year in a little PPR or whatever. I mean, I just don't see enough targets coming out of there. I mean, Jacksonville has a, pretty nice schedule playing in the AFC South, but Zay Jones is obviously, the potential candidate to see a pretty significant drop in carries and Evan Ingram. But it remains to be seen how many targets they'll be throwing to the running backs, and they're already kind of talking about to limit Travis Etienne's touches. So we'll see how that plays out. I mean, at this point, with Jacksonville being very, very heavy favorites in AFC South, I feel like this is an offense that you want as much exposure to as you can. But right now, for me, Christian Kirk is the one that I'm targeting ahead of Calvin Ridley. And, I'm not trying to be alarmist with that, but it just feels to me like it's the consistent slot role, the consistent target share that I'm taking the safe approach versus, going for the upside with. And of course you do want to take your shots, just that you don't really need to in this offense.
Yeah. And I guess too, I mean, like you said, Kirk finished top 12 last year. I mean, you have him ranked 22nd, so he's still losing some stuff. He's just not all the way down at 31 where everyone else has him. So he's still, you have him more of instead of a back end wide receiver 1, he's a back end wide receiver 2. So there, take some of that away, give it to Ridley, and just kind of move on. So I get it. And you're not the only one too. I've heard a lot of people are kind of confused about the ADP kind of drop on Kirk and having, the different rankings of the receivers.
Come up with it's just people reacting to Calvin getting reinstated.
Yeah. Kadarius Toney, you have him slightly ahead of the consensus rankings. You have him at 35. Consensus rankings are 40. Why do you have him ahead of rankings? And I do like Toney.
Yeah, it's just funny. I just said, for Jacksonville, I would prefer to take the safe approach, but for Kansas City, it's kind of the opposite. Friend of the show, friend of everyone, Scott Barrett, his famous thing is upside wins championships. And that's what you have with Kadarius Toney. As of right now, I know the team is linked to DeAndre Hopkins. They were interested in trading for him previously, and now that he's on the open market, if they can squeeze him into the salary cap, it makes a ton of sense. You're talking about one of the most potent offenses in the league already. And as of us talking this evening, Kadarius Toney is the threat to emerge as the Chiefs' number 1 receiver. And that gives him huge, significant upside. not even to throw in the fact that he's got elite athletic profile. He's huge playmaking ability. Obviously, huge concerns is staying healthy. If he can stay healthy, he's got a ton of upside. In this offense, you're going to see him as a very popular sleeper target. And I imagine, a month or two from now, his ADP is going to be 8-10 spots higher than it is right now. Right now, I'm at the point where you can get him as wide receiver 34, wide receiver 40, somewhere in that range. I'm taking as many shares of him as I can.
Yeah, and obviously Hopkins would kind of kill that for you if they added Hopkins to the team.
It would be I still would be interested in Tony, but at that point,
much cheaper. Yeah,
I would let the dust settle, because at that point his ADP is probably going to move down at least 8 or 10 spots. I'd like to have Hopkins, at that point too. But if DeAndre Hopkins signs in Kansas City, my opinion would be that Hopkins' ADP would then become a little bit too risky for me, because he would probably be somewhere between wide receiver 15 and 20. And, in this offense, with the way that things get spread around, there's no real indication that any particular guy is going to be all of a sudden a target monster there, outside of Travis Kelce, of course. So, I would approach someone that high with caution. If I can get Kadarius Toney as their wide receiver 20 spots lower, I'm way more interested.
Yeah, no, I get it. And, they spread the ball around a lot in Kansas City. And Juju Smith-Schuster was wide receiver 18 last year before he got hurt. So if you figure maybe Hopkins is, at least as good as Juju, maybe he gets up conservatively as wide receiver 18 would be nice there. All right. Moving on to Juju Smith-Schuster. You have him as wide receiver 30. That's right. Wide receiver 36. Expert consensus rankings, wide receiver 45. You're 9 spots higher on Juju.
It's been my career path to really like Juju Smith-Schuster every season, to roster him in every dynasty league and every league, and to be too high on him every year. But still, listen, last year was just a disaster for New England with Bill Belichick getting too cute with how he could handle the offense, and it predictably went south. He's got Bill O'Brien there now, and say what you want, especially us here in Houston area. We'll say what we want about Bill O'Brien as a offensive genius and personnel man, but he's going to bring some stability to that offense for New England. It's going to be way, way more efficient and way better than it was last year. And what I like about Juju Smith-Schuster is, I think we can all agree he's a better receiver than Jacoby Myers. And that's the role I envision he's there to take over. Keep in mind, Jacoby Myers was wide receiver 29 in PPR points per game last season. Like I just said, I think Juju Smith-Schuster is better than him in just about every capacity. Add in the fact that you now have Bill O'Brien there calling the shots, scheming up the offense. I'm pretty optimistic that Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be, going to outplay his ADP. And remember, he's still, I think Juju Smith-Schuster is all of 26, 27 years old. People think, wow, he's been in the league for so long now. He's got to be 31, but no, he's still a young guy. He came into the league at 20. So New England has this history of funneling a lot of targets to their slot receiver. I feel like that's going to be Juju Smith-Schuster's role. And I feel optimistic that he's going to actually see as many or more targets than he had even last year.
Yeah, and I think people are, I'm not high on the Patriots as a whole, but you're right. If they're probably going to be playing from behind, they're not going to be very good. They're going to be a division where they got to keep up. Jets, Dolphins, Bills are going to have to throw the ball. Mac Jones is, I think, a capable quarterback as far as like getting the ball to the guys that need to get the ball. He's not going to run. He can't run. So he's going to have to distribute the football. And Juju's fine. Tyquan Thornton, keep an eye on him. He's been on my sleeper list, and not that it matters on May 31st, but he's been explosive and OTAs so far. Looks awesome. So he's a real athletic type receiver. So, but yeah, there's probably going to be some value to be had in this receiving core. Robert Woods, old trusty, reliable Robert Woods, the guy who kept people from drafting Cooper Kupp 2 years ago. Wide receiver 56. ECR has a wide receiver 83.
Right.
What's up?
I just, in my initial projections, I feel like Robert Woods is the veteran presence with inside, outside flexibility that is likely to emerge as that leadership role as Houston's potential number one wide receiver. We starting CJ Stroud as a quarterback, so he's going to be looking for that veteran safety valve type receiver. That's a role that Robert Woods can fill nicely. Texans obviously signing him to $15 million 2-year deal. They plan on utilizing him. He's not someone that they brought in as a 1-year prove it deal that they can just dismiss that easily. And at this point, it's just getting a potential number one receiver that late in the draft. Like you said, ADP 83. That means in the vast majority of drafts, he's not even getting selected. So he's basically free. There's no downside to taking a shot on round 15 or round 16 on a Robert Woods as your wide receiver 6 or as your wide receiver 7. That's all I'm saying. Like I said, do I expect him to emerge as a guy that is going to be a usable fantasy option all week, all year, every week? Probably not, but he's going to have his moments. I expect Houston's offense to be significantly better with Stroud. And like I said, right now he projects to be my wide receiver 1. So, it's just a free pick.
Yeah, no, I like that. And he's one of those guys, like, if you're looking for a floor in best ball drafts, like you grab a guy like him who, we're always shooting for the moon at guys like Tyquan Thornton and all these guys. Oh, imagine what they could be. But there's something to be said in best ball for taking guys like Robert Woods, those, 6 for 60 games that he might have in that offense that's going to have to pass. They're going to be playing from behind. They're not very good. But so yeah, he's one of those nice floor, like you said, wide receiver 6 or 7s that you can add to your roster at the back end there. Moving on to tight end, Hayden Hurst, tight end 22 over rank of tight end 29, which is almost going undrafted in some of these leagues. Why the Hayden Hurst love?
It's like I said, tight end's pretty sharp right now. I had a little trouble for this particular episode coming up with some decent tight ends. I just feel like at his ADP, I was in on him last year. The Panthers are paying him close to $22 million. He's going to be involved. You have the old narrative of rookie quarterbacks with their tight ends. Hurst averaged 8.1 fantasy points per game last year. That ranked 19th at tight end. It's nothing to get too excited about. I just feel like he's going to be probably pretty consistently involved in Carolina's offense from a week-to-week basis. So he's a guy that I feel like is remarkably cheap. I don't see a ton of upside on Hurst. I think he can be, best case scenario, he can maybe emerge as your QB 14 your tight end 14 or 15. But the vast majority of us are going to miss out on the elite tier of tight ends. So what we're going to be doing is dumpster diving here at the end of the draft and going with a rotation or even streaming guys week to week. So Hayden Hurst, fits the bill for a lot of those things. And I think he's just a guy to, keep in mind late in the draft or to, keep him as a potential waiver wire claim once the season starts.
Yeah, I think people forget Hayden Hurst was a first round pick. I think they drafted him before Lamar Jackson. Like I think in that same draft, like he has that first round pedigree. He just got kind of stuck on a team too with like Mark Andrews ended up being awesome and better than he got forced out of there. So there is some talent there, like you said. They paid him. So yeah, you can make a case for. Everyone's got a case for a tight end this late and stuff, but yeah, they don't have a ton of weapons there, so Hayden Hurst could be a guy that could surprise as well. Tight end streaming type deal for sure. And the last man on your list here, tight end 20, Sam Laporta, rookie tight end for the Lions. Talk to us about Sam Laporta.
I love this rookie class for tight ends. Now that's a dangerous classification to target in fantasy football. As we all know, the learning curve for tight ends is awfully difficult. So you never want to overdraft tight ends in first year tight ends in fantasy football. But so far, Laporta is one of the most hyped guys. You're seeing in OTAs, he's been out there turning heads with the way he's been getting off the ball. He's been lining out wide. There's going to be a big void, at least for the first 7 weeks of the season for Detroit with Jameson Williams suspended. So there's a real possibility that Sam Laporta can emerge as a pretty credible threat. Overall, last year, the Lions I think they threw 93 targets to their tight ends all season, which is fairly low. However, they were featured pretty prominently in and around the stripe. There was there was one week where, one tight end caught 2 or 3 touchdowns, and the next week the other guy did that right after everyone spent all their fab budget to pick up the previous.
Zylstra.
Yeah,
Zylstra.
That's who it was. I can't even remember the Hammond Eggers is who they were. I can't even remember their names. But I think Laporta can come in and make those guys as irrelevant as they should be, and come in and be a significant factor. And I firmly expect with what I'm hearing, and seeing around fantasy football, that at wide receiver, at tight end 20, he's probably good. That's probably going to be his floor. I expect his ADP is actually going to creep up. So if you're drafting here in late May or early June, you got a draft that starts this week. If you can get Sam Laporta in the lower 20s for your ADP draft, go ahead and snag him while you can, because like I said, I think he's going to be a pretty consistent riser throughout the whole summer.
Interesting. So this will be the only guy I'm going to push back on, and I have nothing to push back except for I just fade rookie tight ends. Now, again, consensus rankings 31. At that point, you take him at 31, you are fading him. So, fine. You want to take him at the consensus 31, fine. 20 is a little steep for me. Again, it's just a rookie tight end thing. I'm in on Dalton Kincaid, because I think he's not going to play tight end. They've got Dawson Knox there. I think he's going to play the big slot. Obviously, if the Bills get Hopkins, that changes things. The other thing that confuses me too about the Lions is they have a former tight end as their coach, and they had TJ Hawkinson on the roster. You would have thought that they would have loved Hawkinson, and then they trade him away mid-season, and it's like, oh no, what's wrong with Hawkinson? Is he a head case? Is he not as good as we think? No, he goes to Minnesota and smashes. So it's trades him in the division. So I don't even necessarily know if they know what they want to do at tight end. So I'm happy to fade Laporta, and if he beats me, he beats me. But he's just a guy. If he's going to go in the 20 where you have him ranked, I'll probably be off him 31. If he's my tight end 3 in these best ball tournaments, fine. But usually a lot of times I'm not even taking it to tight end 3.
It's all about how many of these snaps, like you mentioned Kincaid, he's basically being hyped up as a big slot receiver. Could be the same thing for Laporta, but in OTAs, he was taking plenty of reps on the perimeter, which makes sense. Detroit's a little thin at receiver right now without Jamison Williams, so we'll see.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Good stuff. So yeah, that's it for tonight's consensus ranking show. Love all the quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end knowledge Jody was dropping tonight. You can find Jody at Jody Smith NFL on Twitter. You can find me at Adam _Krautwurst. And you'll find us every week here, usually Wednesday nights, I think, at the FullTime Fantasy Podcast. So for FullTime Fantasy, I'm Addy. That's Jody. And we'll see you next week.